Most people think they understand their own minds. They believe their thoughts are private, their memories are accurate, and their perceptions show them reality as it truly is. But the human mind isn't the simple, straightforward machine we imagine it to be. Scientists have spent decades uncovering just how strange and surprising our inner world really is, discovering that much of what we take for granted about thinking, feeling, and remembering works in ways that would astonish us. The mind operates by rules we rarely notice, influenced by forces we can't see, and shaped by processes that happen far below our awareness. What feels like solid ground beneath our mental feet turns out to be far more fluid and mysterious than anyone expected. We'll be exploring these hidden truths about psychology in this video and learn how the mind really works behind the scenes. If you like these videos, I would appreciate if you clicked like or subscribed, as it's important for the channel and it helps others find it too. Just like you did, thank you. Now, let's get started. The human mind carries within it an endless collection of secrets, mysteries that psychology slowly unravels. One discovery at a time, each revelation opens another door into the hidden chambers of consciousness, where thoughts form, memories hide, and perceptions shift like shadows on water. When darkness falls and the world grows quiet, something remarkable happens to human honesty. The late hours seem to strip away the careful masks we wear during daylight, leaving us more exposed, more truthful. Mental filters that guard our words throughout the day begin to weaken as fatigue settles in. Cognitive control, that watchful guardian of our social selves, loosens its grip. In these tender hours, conversations can drift into deeper waters, touching places we rarely visit in the bright, busy world of day. The intimate atmosphere of nighttime creates a sanctuary for openness, where fewer distractions exist, where dimmer light softens the edges of vulnerability. It's as if the mind finally exhales, releasing guarded thoughts that have waited all day for their moment to emerge. This phenomenon whispers something profound about human nature, how we navigate the delicate balance between protection and connection, between hiding and revealing who we truly are. The modern world celebrates multitasking as a skill, a badge of efficiency in our fast-paced lives. But the brain tells a different story entirely. When we divide our attention among multiple tasks, we unknowingly weaken our ability to remember each experience fully. The mind's attention system works like a spotlight, most powerful when focused on a single point. When that beam scatters across several targets, each receives less illumination. Information begins competing for mental resources, creating a kind of cognitive traffic jam where details get lost. Conversations become fragments, and experiences fade before they can properly form into memories. Research reveals that frequent multitaskers may even lose their ability to filter out irrelevant information, making concentration increasingly difficult over time. There's something almost philosophical about this trade-off, the way our pursuit of doing more actually leaves us with less. The mind records life most vividly when allowed to linger, to savor one moment, one task, one conversation at a time. In a world demanding constant switching, choosing slowness becomes an act of rebellion, a gift we give to our future selves. Human touch carries healing powers that science is only beginning to understand fully. When another person places their hand on your shoulder, or when fingers intertwine with yours, something extraordinary occurs within your nervous system. Physical touch activates sensory pathways that literally compete with pain signals traveling to your brain, reducing their intensity through a kind of neural interference. But the magic goes deeper than simple signal blocking. Touch triggers the release of oxytocin, that remarkable hormone linked to bonding and stress reduction. This chemical messenger floods your system, creating cascades of calm that ripple through both body and mind. The phenomenon reveals something beautiful about human connection, how we're wired, not just for survival, but for comfort, how our bodies recognize and respond to the healing presence of another. In hospitals, research shows that patients recover more quickly when touched by caring hands. Children cry less when held. Adults report lower pain levels when someone they trust is simply present. Skin meeting skin, in the oldest language of compassion our species knows. Physical connection between people runs deeper than we might expect. When couples hold hands during painful moments, something remarkable happens in their brains. The neural activity between two people begins to mirror each other, creating a kind of biological harmony. This synchronization isn't just coincidence, it's the brain's way of sharing the burden of discomfort. The person experiencing pain actually feels less of it when their partner's touch creates this neural bridge. It's as if the nervous system recognizes it as backup, another consciousness, willing to shoulder some of the load. This makes you wonder about the invisible threads that connect us, how our bodies seem designed to find each other in moments of need. Touch acts like a biological anchor, keeping us tethered to the feeling that we're not isolated in our suffering. There's something profound about how the simplest human gesture, skin touching skin, can alter the very electrical patterns in our minds. The brainwaves don't just stay separate, they begin to dance together, creating a shared rhythm of healing. This physiological partnership suggests that empathy isn't just an emotional concept, it's something measurable, something that shows up in the machinery of our minds when we reach out to each other. Your sense of smell operates like a secret pathway to your decision-making. Most of the time, you have no idea it's happening. Scent molecules travel through your nose and take a direct route to ancient brain regions, the same areas that handle your deepest emotions and most vivid memories. This bypass around conscious thought means smells can influence what you choose in anything. It's like having a hidden advisor, whispering suggestions you can't quite hear. Retail environments use this invisible influence all the time. Pleasant aromas drifting through stores actually increase the chances that shoppers will buy something. The smell of cleaning products can trigger people to start tidying up without them connecting the dots between scent and action. These responses happen because certain odors prime specific thoughts and feelings. Lavender tends to slow things down, creating a sense of calm that makes the body want to rest. Citrus scents do the opposite, energizing the mind and making everything feel fresh and possible. We like to think our choices come from pure logic, but the truth is more complicated. Invisible sensory signals constantly nudge our decisions in directions we don't recognize. Understanding this hidden influence gives you a kind of power, the ability to notice when your environment might be shaping your thoughts. It's fascinating how the nose, such a small part of your face, can have such a large say in how you move through the world. Sleep creates some interesting tricks of the mind, particularly when it comes to how rested you feel. Scientists discovered that believing you've slept well can actually improve your performance the next day, even when your actual sleep was poor. Research participants who were told they had above-average sleep quality scored better on thinking tests, regardless of how many hours they'd actually gotten. This placebo sleep effect shows how powerfully expectation can reshape both mental sharpness and mood. Your brain uses belief as a shortcut when calculating how much energy to give you. If it thinks you're well rested, it adjusts your focus and alertness accordingly. Real sleep remains essential for health. There's no substitute for genuine rest over time. But this phenomenon reveals something remarkable about consciousness, how the stories we tell ourselves about our condition can actually change that condition. Part of feeling rested apparently comes not just from hours spent unconscious, but from the narrative your mind creates about those hours. Many people have felt the strange sensation of being watched, only to turn around and discover someone's eyes actually on them. Science hasn't completely solved this mystery, but research suggests we might be picking up on extremely subtle environmental changes. A slight shift in shadows, movement caught in peripheral vision, or barely audible sounds could alert us below the level of awareness. Our brains have been fine-tuned over thousands of years to detect when social attention is focused our way. This sensitivity likely helped our ancestors survive in a world full of predators and complex social dynamics. Knowing when eyes were on you could mean the difference between safety and danger, between social acceptance and rejection. Whether this works through enhanced perception or some deeper instinct we don't fully understand, the feeling can be so strong it makes you act before your conscious mind catches up. It's like getting a quiet message from the more ancient parts of yourself, the parts that remember when being watched could change everything. Your body language often knows things about your emotional state before your conscious mind does. Posture, hand movements, and tiny facial expressions can broadcast feelings you haven't even admitted to yourself yet. Crossed arms might signal defensiveness you're not ready to acknowledge. Subtle changes in your voice could indicate anxiety you're trying to ignore. Psychologists have found that these physical cues are sometimes more obvious to other people than they are to you. Creating a situation where your body is having a conversation your mind isn't aware of. This creates an interesting paradox, where others might understand your internal state better than you do, simply by watching how you hold yourself and move through space. Your unconscious mind seems to use your body as a kind of external display, showing the world what's happening inside, even when you're not ready to see it yourself. Your body speaks a language that has no words. When someone crosses their arms during a conversation, when pupils dilate in dim light, when shoulders tense without warning, these are all signals broadcasting information. Sometimes this silent communication reveals what words never could. A person might say they feel calm, but their fidgeting hands tell a different story. They might claim disinterest, yet their body leans forward, drawn by curiosity they won't admit to feeling. This unspoken dialogue happens constantly, flowing beneath every interaction like an underground river. Your posture right now, the way you hold your head, the tension in your jaw, all of these carry messages about your inner state. When you learn to notice these signals in others, something shifts in how you connect with people. You start picking up on emotions they haven't put into words yet. You sense discomfort before it gets voiced, or excitement before it gets shared. But perhaps the most fascinating part is how this works in reverse. Your own body holds clues about thoughts you might not even realize you're having. Sometimes, paying attention to how you're sitting or standing can reveal feelings that haven't quite made it to consciousness yet. It's like catching a glimpse of your mind's rough draft before it writes the final version. The brain has a peculiar relationship with unfinished business. There's something about incomplete tasks that makes them stick to our thoughts like burrs on clothing. You might forget the name of a movie you watched last week, but the email you started writing 3 days ago that keeps surfacing in your mind at random moments. Psychologists have a name for this phenomenon, and it turns out our minds are wired to hold on to loose ends. This mental quirk probably evolved for good reasons. Our ancestors needed to remember which tasks were half done, which shelters needed finishing, which food stores required attention. But in modern life, this same mechanism can turn into a source of persistent mental chatter. The unfinished report, the conversation that ended awkwardly, the project sitting at 90% completion, all of these create little loops that keep running in the background of consciousness. Interestingly, sometimes just writing these things down can quiet the mental noise. It's as if the brain needs acknowledgement that these tasks exist, even if they can't be completed immediately. The act of making a list tells some deeper part of the mind that nothing important will be forgotten. This creates a kind of mental permission to let go, at least temporarily. The sense of smell operates by entirely different rules than our other senses. While sight and sound travel through multiple processing stations in the brain, scent takes a more direct route. It connects almost immediately to areas involved in memory and emotion. This is why certain smells can transport you instantly to moments you thought you'd forgotten completely. A whiff of a particular soap might suddenly bring back your grandmother's bathroom in vivid detail. The smell of rain on hot asphalt could resurrect a summer afternoon from childhood with startling clarity. These aren't just casual memories, they arrive with full emotional weight, as if no time has passed at all. The past doesn't feel like the past anymore. It feels immediate and present. This direct connection between smell and memory suggests something profound about how our minds actually work. We often think of memory as filing cabinets, organized and retrievable on demand. But smell reveals memory as something more like a living ecosystem, where certain triggers can awaken entire landscapes of experience that seemed completely dormant. Scientists have found that these scent-triggered memories tend to be more emotional and more detailed than memories accessed through other means. It's as if smell provides a skeleton key to locked rooms in the mind, rooms that contain not just images and facts, but the full texture of how moments actually felt. when they were happening. Sometimes during sleep, consciousness doesn't completely disappear. Instead, it transforms into something stranger and more fluid. In these moments, you might find yourself aware that you're dreaming while still remaining inside the dream. This awareness can sometimes grant a peculiar kind of control over the dream environment itself. People who experience these states report reshaping their dreams as they unfold. They fly over imaginary landscapes, breathe underwater in impossible oceans, or rewrite conversations with people from their past. The dream world becomes a kind of laboratory where the usual rules don't apply, where thoughts can become immediate reality without the normal constraints of physics or logic. Research suggests this happens when certain brain regions associated with self-awareness remain partially active during sleep. It's as if part of the mind stays awake enough to observe, while another part continues creating the rich, strange narratives of dreams. Some people find these experiences occurring naturally, while others develop techniques to encourage them. What's particularly intriguing is that skills practiced in these controlled dream states sometimes translate to improvements in waking life. It's as if the brain doesn't always distinguish between vivid imagination and actual experience when it comes to learning and memory formation. This blurs the line between what's real and what's constructed, suggesting that our minds are far more creative and flexible than we usually give them credit for. The simple act of focusing on what you're grateful for can actually change your body's chemistry. When people regularly practice gratitude, whether through journaling or quiet reflection, their stress hormone levels tend to decrease. Cortisol, the chemical released during tense or anxious moments, shows up less frequently in the bloodstream of people who consciously acknowledge good things in their lives. This isn't just a psychological effect, it's measurable in the body itself. Brain scans of people who practice gratitude show increased activity in regions associated with empathy and positive emotion. It's as if thankfulness creates physical pathways that make joy more accessible and stress less overwhelming. What makes this particularly interesting is how simple the practice can be. Taking a few moments before sleep to mentally review positive moments from the day, or writing down 3 things that went well, these small acts can create measurable changes in both brain function and hormone production. The mind and body respond to gratitude as if it were a form of medicine, one that's freely available and has no negative side effects. This suggests something hopeful about human nature, that we're wired not just to notice problems and threats, but to benefit physically from recognizing goodness when it appears. In a world that often emphasizes what's wrong or missing, gratitude becomes a quiet form of rebellion, a way of training attention toward what's worth celebrating. Gratitude works its way through your body, like medicine you never had to swallow. When researchers look at what happens inside someone who practices gratitude regularly, they find changes that go far beyond just feeling good. The immune system gets stronger, sleep becomes deeper, the heart beats with more steady rhythm. There's something almost ancient about this response, as if our bodies were designed to reward us for noticing abundance rather than scarcity. When you focus on what you have instead of what's missing, your nervous system shifts into a calmer state. It's like turning down the volume on an alarm system that never quite stops ringing. The brain has this fascinating ability to process information that never quite reaches your conscious mind. Researchers call this subliminal priming, and it happens more often than most people realize. Scientists can flash words on a screen for just a few milliseconds, so fast that you can't actually read them. But somehow, your brain still picks up on whether those words were positive or negative. Later, when you're shown a completely neutral image, your rating of that image gets colored by those invisible words you never consciously saw. It's as if there's a whole conversation happening beneath the surface of awareness, shaping your reactions in ways you never notice. This reveals something profound about how perception actually works. Your conscious mind isn't the only thing deciding what you think or feel. Below the threshold of awareness, your brain is constantly scanning, filtering, processing signals from the environment. Most of these impressions never turn into thoughts you can put into words, but they influence you anyway. They can nudge your decisions in subtle directions, leave you with hunches you can't explain, or create feelings that seem to come from nowhere. It's like living with whispers at the edge of hearing, always there, but never quite clear enough to understand. Music has this remarkable power to unlock memories that seemed completely lost. A song from decades ago can transport you instantly back to a specific moment, complete with all the emotions you felt then. You might hear a melody from your teenage years, and suddenly you're standing in your old bedroom again, or sitting in a car with friends on a summer night. This happens because music engages multiple brain regions simultaneously. The auditory cortex processes the sound, motor areas respond to rhythm, and most importantly, the limbic system, where emotions and memories are stored, lights up like a Christmas tree. When all these areas activate together, they create incredibly rich memory networks. For people with Alzheimer's disease, this connection between music and memory can be almost miraculous. Someone who struggles to remember their own name might suddenly sing along perfectly to a song from their youth. Every word crystal clear. It's as if the music bypasses the damaged pathways and finds another route to those stored memories. This suggests that our memories aren't really lost, even when we can't access them normally. They're still there, waiting for the right key to unlock them. Music seems to be one of the most powerful keys we have, reaching into places where words and pictures can't go. The mind's expectation about healing can actually influence how well the body recovers. This isn't just positive thinking or wishful imagination. When researchers study optimistic people going through medical treatment, they find measurable differences in recovery rates. Optimistic patients often heal faster from surgery, respond better to medications, and show stronger immune system activity. There's something in the biology of hope that translates into real physical changes. Optimism seems to reduce the kind of chronic stress that interferes with healing. It encourages people to stick with their treatment plans, to take better care of themselves, to maintain the energy needed for recovery. This doesn't mean pretending everything is fine when it isn't, or forcing yourself to smile through genuine hardship. It's more about maintaining a sense that difficulties can be overcome, that the future holds possibilities beyond the current struggle. When your mind expects healing, your body seems more willing to cooperate with that expectation. Human beings have an almost irresistible fascination with social information, especially the kind that reveals something about other people's character or behavior. If you tell someone a piece of gossip and a neutral fact at the same time, they'll almost always remember the gossip better. This preference for social information probably comes from our evolutionary past. For thousands of years, humans lived in small groups where knowing who could be trusted was literally a matter of survival. Information about someone's reliability, their alliances, their hidden motivations, could mean the difference between safety and danger. The human mind has this peculiar fascination with other people's secrets and scandals. When we hear about someone cheating on their partner or lying to their boss, our brains light up in ways that don't happen when we learn mundane facts about the weather. Scientists have discovered that we remember gossip much more easily than we remember neutral information. It's as if our minds are fine-tuned gossip machines, storing every juicy detail for later use. This isn't just idle curiosity either. When researchers test people's memory, they find something remarkable. Show someone a list that includes both physical descriptions and behavioral scandals, and they'll recall the scandals every time. The untrustworthy actions, the moral failures, the social missteps, these stick in our memory like burrs on clothing. Meanwhile, details about height, weight, or clothing fade away almost immediately. There's something profound happening in our neural networks when we process social information. Special circuits in the brain activate, circuits that evolved over millions of years to help us navigate complex social worlds. These networks draw our attention like magnets, ensuring that information about others' behavior gets filed away safely for future reference. Think about how quickly rumors spread compared to regular news. A celebrity scandal will race across social media faster than important policy announcements. A workplace rumor about someone's promotion travels through office hallways at lightning speed. This ancient gossip machinery is still running at full capacity in our modern world. Of course, gossip can be destructive, tearing apart relationships and reputations. But it also serves a deeper purpose that we rarely acknowledge. It helps groups maintain their unspoken rules and standards. When we share stories about who can be trusted and who can't, we're actually protecting each other from potential harm. We're maintaining the invisible boundaries that hold communities together. Whether our ancestors whispered around campfires, or we share stories through digital screens today, the underlying drive remains the same. Our brains are deeply, fundamentally interested in what other people are doing, especially when they're doing something wrong. Sometimes our brains play tricks on us that feel almost supernatural. That strange sensation of déjà vu, where reality seems to stutter and repeat itself. You walk into a room and suddenly feel like you've lived this exact moment before. The lighting, the conversation, the way someone's hand moves through the air, it all feels impossibly familiar. Scientists think this eerie feeling comes from a glitch in our recognition systems. Somewhere in the temporal lobe, in the areas that handle memory, something misfires. A new experience gets tagged as familiar, even though it's completely fresh. It's like the brain's filing system makes a mistake, putting a new memory in the wrong folder. This might happen when a current situation closely matches patterns from our past, even if we can't consciously recall the original experience. Maybe the combination of sounds, smells, and visual elements creates an echo of something we've forgotten. The brain recognizes the pattern, but can't quite place it, creating that ghostly sense of repetition. For most people, déjà vu lasts only a few seconds and then vanishes, but in those brief moments, reality feels doubled, layered with the shadow of a past that might never have existed. It's a reminder that our perception isn't a perfect recording device. Instead, it's more like a storyteller, constantly interpreting and reinterpreting the world around us. Sometimes that storyteller gets ahead of itself, creating narratives that feel more real than reality. In those flickering moments of déjà vu, we glimpse how fragile and constructed our sense of the present really is. Anxiety has a curious way of revealing itself through speech. When people get nervous, their words start coming faster, tumbling over each other in a rush to be heard. It's as if the fight or flight response hijacks not just the body but the mouth as well. Heart rate increases, breathing quickens, and suddenly thoughts are racing faster than the tongue can keep up. You can hear it happening in real time. Sentences that should have natural pauses get compressed into breathless streams. Words blur together as adrenaline pushes for urgency, for immediate understanding. The nervous speaker might stumble over familiar phrases or skip important pauses that would normally give their words room to breathe. This effect can be subtle, just a slight quickening of rhythm that you might not consciously notice. Or it can be so pronounced that the words become almost unintelligible. Either way, it reveals something fascinating about the connection between our emotional state and our communication. What's even more interesting is how this nervous energy spreads. Fast, anxious speech can make listeners feel uneasy too. Emotional states ripple through groups like waves, carrying tension from person to person through the simple act of speaking. But here's the remarkable part. This process can work in reverse. When someone deliberately slows their speech, it actually calms their nervous system. The body responds to the slower pace by reducing stress hormones and steadying the heartbeat. Speech becomes not just a window into our emotional state, but a tool for changing it. In this way, the simple act of talking reveals the deep connections between mind and body, between internal experience and external expression. Every conversation becomes a delicate dance between revealing and controlling our inner worlds. Despite all our sophisticated brain imaging technology and decades of research, the organ inside our skulls remains largely mysterious. We can trace electrical signals as they zip between neurons. We can map the general regions responsible for different functions, but the deeper questions still elude us completely. How does consciousness actually emerge from neural activity? Why do some memories feel vivid while others fade to nothing? What's happening in those vast areas of the brain that seem to have no clearly defined purpose? These questions remain as puzzling today as they were a century ago. Every brain contains roughly 86 billion neurons, each one connected to thousands of others through an intricate web of synapses. The resulting network is more complex than any computer humans have ever built, more sophisticated than the internet itself. Yet this biological supercomputer operates on the power of a small light bulb. New studies reveal fascinating details about how individual brain regions function, but they also uncover entirely new mysteries. For every answer neuroscience provides, it seems to generate 3 new questions. We've explored perhaps a tiny fraction of what there is to know about this living universe contained within our skulls. Like early explorers mapping coastlines, while vast continents remained undiscovered, we're still just beginning to understand the true scope of the mind. In those quiet moments between thoughts, in the spaces where consciousness seems to pause and observe itself, we're reminded that we carry an unsolved mystery with us everywhere we go. The brain isn't just a biological machine processing information, it's the very thing that makes us human, and we've barely begun to understand how it works. Our minds are surprisingly predictable when it comes to daily thinking patterns. Most thoughts that cross our consciousness today are simply variations of what we pondered yesterday. The same worries, the same mental loops, the same familiar territories our brain loves to revisit. It's like walking the same path through a forest, day after day, until the ground becomes worn smooth. This repetition isn't accidental. Our brains are designed for efficiency, much like a river carving its way through rock. Creating new neural pathways requires energy, effort, real, metabolic cost. So the mind takes shortcuts, reusing established routes whenever possible. It's practical, but it can trap us in cycles of familiar thinking. When we deliberately shake up our routines, something fascinating happens. New neural connections begin forming. Taking an unfamiliar street home, learning to play an instrument, traveling to places where nothing looks familiar, these experiences force the brain out of its comfortable patterns. Suddenly, thoughts that felt impossible before start emerging naturally. There's something almost magical about watching a yawn spread across a crowded room. One person tilts their head back, opens their mouth wide, and within moments, others follow suit. No words exchanged, no conscious decision made, yet the behavior ripples outward like stones dropped in still water. This contagious yawning crosses species boundaries in remarkable ways. Chimpanzees catch yawns from other chimps. Dogs yawn when their owners do. Even some birds participate in this strange social synchronization. Scientists think it's connected to our capacity for empathy, this unconscious mirroring of those around us. The closer we feel to someone, the more likely we are to catch their yawn. Friends trigger our yawning response more than strangers do. Partners more than acquaintances. It suggests that yawning serves as a silent social glue, synchronizing groups in ways we barely notice. While individual yawns help regulate brain temperature and boost alertness, the spreading effect seems to serve a different purpose entirely. It creates invisible bonds, quiet acknowledgements of shared experience. In a world where we often feel isolated, a contagious yawn reminds us that we're part of something larger. The human brain's relationship with pain reveals just how flexible our internal experience can be. Under hypnosis, people regularly report feeling less discomfort, sometimes none at all, during procedures that would normally cause significant pain. Brain imaging shows that hypnotic states actually alter activity in regions responsible for processing pain signals. This isn't about blocking the initial sensation. The nerves still fire, the signals still travel upward through the spinal cord. What changes is how the brain interprets those signals once they arrive. It's like having a translator who suddenly starts speaking a different language. Medical professionals have used this phenomenon for dental work, surgery, even childbirth. Though hypnotic pain relief doesn't work equally well for everyone, some people seem naturally more responsive to suggestion, more able to shift their mental state on command. The underlying mechanism reveals something profound about human consciousness. Pain isn't just a simple alarm bell ringing in our bodies. It's a complex conversation between physical sensation, brain processing, and conscious awareness. And sometimes, awareness can change the entire dialogue. Writing about difficult emotions creates measurable changes in physical health. When people spend time putting their feelings into words, whether in private journals or letters they never send, their bodies respond in surprising ways. Blood pressure drops. Immune system function improves. Mood stabilizes over time. The act of translating emotions into language seems to help the brain process experiences more effectively. Feelings that felt overwhelming when they remained wordless become more manageable once they're captured in sentences and paragraphs. It's as if naming our internal states gives us power over them. When you put pen to paper, something remarkable happens inside your mind. The swirling chaos of emotions begins to find structure, almost like watching fog slowly form into recognizable shapes. Your brain takes those vague, uncomfortable feelings and transforms them into something it can actually work with. There's a kind of relief that comes with this process, a lightening of mental load that frees up space for other thoughts to breathe. The beauty of this practice lies not in perfect sentences or flawless grammar. What matters is raw honesty, the willingness to translate what lives inside you into words on a page. When we give language to our inner world, we're essentially giving form to the formless. It's like taking something that felt too big to hold and shrinking it down to manageable size. The page becomes this safe container, holding what might otherwise feel overwhelming when it's just bouncing around in your head. Over months and years, this simple act helps untangle the knots of complex emotions. What once felt impossible to understand becomes clearer, easier to carry through daily life. There's something profound about how language can tame the wildness of feeling, turning storms into stories we can actually live with. Your brain remembers feelings far more easily than it remembers facts. This isn't some design flaw, it's actually how we're built to survive and thrive. The human mind runs on emotion, and this emotional foundation shapes every single thing we remember. When something happens that's tied to strong feelings, joy, terror, grief, pure excitement, it gets stamped into memory with remarkable staying power. Neutral details, the boring everyday stuff, tends to fade away like morning mist. This emotional tagging system works like a priority filter for your brain. It helps decide what's worth keeping and what can be safely forgotten. But here's the fascinating part. We often remember how we felt about something much more clearly than what actually happened. Think about eyewitness testimony in courtrooms. The emotional charge of a traumatic event can actually distort the facts, making people absolutely certain about details that weren't quite right. On the flip side, this same system helps us hold on to the emotional lessons from meaningful moments. The feelings from important experiences help reinforce our values, strengthen relationships, teach us what matters. Our memories aren't perfect recordings, they're more like stories told from the heart's perspective. When we look back at the past, we're walking through landscapes of feeling, with facts scattered like interesting stones along the path. Something as simple as chewing gum can actually sharpen your focus. It sounds almost too basic to be true, but there's real science behind this everyday habit. The rhythmic motion of chewing appears to increase blood flow to your brain, while the physical act itself stimulates areas involved in attention and memory. It's like giving your mind a gentle wake-up call. Studies have shown modest but measurable improvements in concentration when people chew gum during demanding tasks. Peppermint varieties seem to work especially well, though scientists aren't entirely sure why. The boost isn't dramatic, but it's enough to make a difference during long, challenging periods. Maybe that's why students reach for it during exams, why drivers keep packs in their cars, why soldiers have used it to stay sharp during difficult missions. There's also a stress reduction component at work here. Chewing gum can lower cortisol levels, creating a double benefit for concentration. When your mind starts to wander, this simple action becomes like a small anchor, gently pulling your attention back to where it needs to be. It's remarkable how something so ordinary can serve as a tool for mental clarity. Your memory has a particular fondness for beginnings and endings. Psychologists call this the primacy and recency effects. the brain's tendency to remember the first and last items in any sequence far better than whatever happens in the middle. The first things get extra rehearsal and attention, while the last things are still fresh in your short-term memory when it comes time to recall. This pattern shows up everywhere in daily life. Think about conversations. You probably remember how they started and how they ended much more clearly than the middle portions. The same thing happens with lectures, movies, even vacations. The opening and closing scenes shine brightest in memory, while the middle gets a bit fuzzy around the edges. Understanding this quirk can actually help with learning. If you place the most important information at the beginning or end of a study session, it has a much better chance of sticking around. In a way, your mind naturally frames experiences like stories, with opening and ending scenes that capture the spotlight. The middle still matters, of course, but it's those first impressions and final moments that tend to linger longest in memory's quiet archives. Your brain can completely miss changes happening right in front of your eyes. This phenomenon, called change blindness, reveals something startling about how perception actually works. Even large, obvious alterations to a scene can go completely unnoticed if they occur at the right moment. It's not that your eyes aren't working properly, it's that your brain is much more selective about what it pays attention to than we typically realize. This selective attention makes perfect sense from an evolutionary standpoint. If we noticed every tiny change in our environment, we'd be completely overwhelmed by information. Instead, our brains focus on what seems important and filter out what appears irrelevant. But sometimes this filtering system creates blind spots that can be quite dramatic, leaving us wondering how we possibly missed something so obvious once it's pointed out to us. When we look away from something, even for just a second, our brain can miss dramatic changes happening right in front of us. Scientists call this change blindness, and it reveals something profound about how we actually see the world. Our attention works like a spotlight, illuminating only small patches of reality at any given moment. The rest remains surprisingly dark to our awareness. In laboratory studies, people stare directly at a photograph, then researchers make obvious alterations during a brief flicker or distraction. When the image reappears, viewers often fail to notice that entire buildings have vanished, or that people have switched places completely. This selective attention isn't a flaw in our design. It's actually essential for survival. If our brains tried to process every single detail in our visual field simultaneously, we'd become overwhelmed and paralyzed. Instead, our minds create a seamless illusion of complete awareness by filling gaps with educated guesses based on past experience. Think about walking through your living room. You assume the couch remains where you left it. The coffee table hasn't moved. The lamp still stands in its corner. Most of the time, these assumptions prove correct. But occasionally, someone rearranges the furniture, and we walk right past the changes without registering them consciously. This phenomenon makes us question the nature of reality itself. What we call seeing is really more like selective sampling. Combined with sophisticated prediction, our brains construct a coherent world from fragments of focused attention, stitched together so skillfully that the seams remain invisible. Your facial muscles can actually convince your brain to feel different emotions. This discovery challenges our intuitive understanding of how feelings work. We typically assume that emotions start in the mind, then express themselves through our faces, but research suggests the relationship flows both ways. When you deliberately form a smile, even without feeling particularly happy, the physical act sends signals back to your brain. These muscular contractions trigger the release of mood-lifting chemicals like dopamine and serotonin. The effect isn't dramatic, but it's measurable. Your brain interprets the smile as evidence that something pleasant must be happening. The reverse holds true as well. Maintaining a frown or clenched jaw reinforces feelings of anger and stress. Your brain reads these facial patterns as confirmation that the situation calls for negative emotions. This feedback loop between expression and experience suggests that our bodies participate in creating our mental states, not just reflecting them. Some meditation traditions have recognized this connection for centuries. Practitioners cultivate a subtle, gentle smile during quiet reflection, barely visible to outside observers. This soft expression seems to generate a corresponding inner state of calm contentment. The implications extend beyond deliberate practice. Throughout each day, our unconscious facial habits may be subtly shaping our emotional landscape. The way we hold our features, the tension we carry in our jaw, the openness of our expression, all contribute to the ongoing conversation between body and mind. Attraction operates through channels far below conscious awareness. While we might believe we rationally evaluate potential romantic partners, much of the decision-making happens in hidden neural circuits before we even realize we're choosing. Facial symmetry registers as appealing across cultures, possibly because it signals genetic health and developmental stability. Vocal tones carry information about hormone levels and emotional states. Even scent plays a role, though most people remain unaware of processing these chemical messages. Personal history layers additional meaning onto these biological foundations. A particular laugh might unconsciously remind you of someone who showed you kindness long ago. A specific hairstyle could echo positive associations from childhood. These connections form instantly, creating feelings of familiarity or warmth that seem to emerge from nowhere. Cultural influences add another dimension to the equation. Beauty standards, social norms, and shared symbols of status or creativity all influence our preferences in ways we rarely examine directly. The result is a complex algorithm running beneath awareness, weighing factors both universal and deeply individual. This unconscious processing doesn't diminish the reality of romantic connection. Instead, it reveals attraction as a sophisticated form of pattern recognition, drawing on evolutionary wisdom, personal experience, and social learning to guide us toward potentially compatible partners. The heart, it seems, has its own intelligence, operating through pathways the conscious mind can barely perceive. Flow states represent moments when human performance transcends ordinary limitations. During these experiences, hours can pass like minutes, effort feels effortless, and self-consciousness completely disappears. Musicians lose themselves in improvisation, athletes perform beyond their usual capabilities, writers find words flowing without struggle. Scientists have identified the conditions that encourage flow. The challenge level must match skill level precisely. Too easy, and boredom sets in. Too difficult, and anxiety takes over. But in that narrow band between, something magical happens. The prefrontal cortex, normally busy with self-monitoring and doubt, quiets down. Action and awareness merge into a single stream of focused attention. People emerging from flow states often report feeling more alive and fulfilled than during any other type of experience. Time distortion occurs regularly, with complex tasks completed in what feels like moments, or brief activities seeming to last for hours. The usual boundaries between self and activity dissolve, replaced by a sense of unity and purpose. This state offers profound insights into the nature of consciousness itself. When the inner critic falls silent and worry about outcomes fades away, we discover capabilities we didn't know we possessed. Flow suggests that peak performance isn't about trying harder, but about getting out of our own way, allowing deeper intelligences to emerge and guide our actions. When you slip into that effortless state of deep focus, time seems to bend around you. Minutes stretch and compress. Thoughts flow like water, finding its course. Artists know this feeling. Coders experience it. Even people solving puzzles at their desk can find themselves swept away. The mind settles into a rhythm, smooth and natural, like watching a river wind toward distant shores. Our brains possess this remarkable ability to rewire themselves, constantly reshaping based on what we experience. Every new guitar chord you learn, every foreign word you memorize, every skill you practice, physically changes the structure inside your head. Scientists can actually see these changes on brain scans. Certain regions grow larger when you challenge them regularly. The connections between neurons strengthen, new pathways form, information flows more easily. Think of it like walking across an empty field. The first time, you push through tall grass, leaving barely a trace. But walk that same route again and again, and eventually you create a clear path. Your brain works the same way, carving mental highways where once there were only faint trails. This process never really stops, either. Children's brains change rapidly, sure, but adults keep building new neural networks throughout their entire lives. The landscape of your mind expands with each new experience, one connection at a time. Technology might soon give us senses we never evolved to have. Researchers are developing devices that translate invisible information into signals our brains can understand. Imagine a belt that vibrates whenever you face north. Wear it long enough, and your brain starts treating those vibrations like a built-in compass. Just like birds migrating thousands of miles, you develop an intuitive sense of direction. Some experimental devices translate magnetic fields into touch sensations. Others convert ultrasonic distances into patterns you can feel. The brain's plasticity, its ability to adapt, means these artificial inputs gradually become as natural as sight or hearing. Users report that over time, they stop consciously interpreting the signals. The information just flows directly into their awareness. Future versions might let us detect ultraviolet light, infrared heat, even chemical traces in the air. Entire dimensions of experience could open up, revealing aspects of reality we can barely imagine now. Your emotional state actually changes what you see around you. This goes beyond just feeling differently about things. Your mood literally alters visual perception itself. When you're happy, colors appear more vivid, details seem sharper, your field of view expands. Joy makes sunsets more brilliant, laughter makes faces more expressive. Anxiety works the opposite way. Fear narrows your focus, dims your color perception, makes you scan for dangers while missing neutral details. A worried mind sees the same street as darker, more threatening. The brain's attention systems shift based on how you feel, filtering and interpreting sensory information differently. This reveals something profound about reality itself. What we call objective perception doesn't really exist. Every moment, the lens of your inner state shapes the world you experience. Change your mood, and you quite literally change your world. The boundary between mind and environment turns out to be far more fluid than most people realize. Social psychology reveals strange patterns in how we behave around others. When someone needs help and you're the only person around, you're much more likely to step in. But add a crowd, and something counterintuitive happens. The more witnesses present, the less likely anyone becomes to offer assistance. Psychologists call this the bystander effect. Responsibility gets diffused among the group. Everyone assumes someone else will handle the situation. Alone, you feel the full weight of moral obligation. In a crowd, that weight gets distributed until it feels almost weightless. When people find themselves in situations where help is needed, something curious happens. The more individuals who witness the problem, the less likely anyone becomes to step forward and assist. This phenomenon appears again and again in research. Whether scientists stage fake emergencies or simply observe how crowds behave when someone drops their belongings on a busy sidewalk, there's something almost paradoxical about human nature here. You might expect that having more people around would increase the chances someone would help, but the opposite proves true. Each person seems to assume someone else will take care of it, creating a kind of collective paralysis that can leave those in need without assistance. But here's where knowledge becomes power. When people understand this tendency, they're far more likely to break free from it. Simply knowing that crowds can create inaction makes individuals more willing to be the one who steps up. It's as if awareness of our own psychological patterns can liberate us from them. The responsibility to act sometimes falls to whoever recognizes it first. In those moments, waiting for others to move might mean no one moves at all. Our bodies communicate in ways we rarely consider. When stress takes hold of someone, their sweat begins carrying chemical messages that drift through the air to everyone nearby. These invisible signals reach other people's brains without anyone being consciously aware of what's happening. Scientists have discovered that these stress compounds can activate brain regions connected to empathy and fear responses. People begin feeling more alert, more anxious, simply by breathing the same air as someone under pressure. The stressed person never says a word about their state, yet their emotional condition spreads to others like ripples across water. This chemical communication system, likely developed to help groups detect danger together. If one member of an ancient community sensed a threat, their stress signals would prime others to be ready for whatever was coming. In our modern world, though, it means that tension in any enclosed space can quietly jump from person to person, creating an atmosphere of unease that no one quite understands. The fascinating thing is that this process works both ways. Just as stress can travel through the air, so can states of calm and relaxation. By managing our own emotional state, we might be influencing everyone around us through pathways that operate below the level of conscious thought. Memory has the power to change how our bodies experience temperature. When people spend time recalling cherished moments from their past, something remarkable happens. They don't just feel emotionally warmer, they actually perceive their physical environment as warmer too. Researchers have tested this by having volunteers think about meaningful memories while measuring their temperature perception. Those lost in nostalgic thoughts consistently reported feeling less cold, even in chilly rooms. The brain seems to connect social warmth with physical warmth, treating them as related experiences rather than separate ones. This connection probably stems from our deep need for safety and belonging. Warm environments and warm relationships both signal security to our ancient survival systems. When we revisit happy times through memory, our bodies respond as if we've actually returned to those comfortable circumstances. During winter months, nostalgic thinking tends to increase naturally. Perhaps the mind reaches for these warming memories as a way to combat the season's chill. A familiar song, an old photograph, the scent of a meal from childhood, any of these triggers can wrap both mind and body in the remembered comfort of better times. Fear spreads through observation alone, without any direct experience of threat. Our brains contain systems that mirror the emotions we see in others, allowing us to feel what they feel simply by watching their reactions. This creates a pathway for learning about dangers we've never personally encountered. Studies show that people who observe someone else displaying fear toward a particular object will later show similar fear responses themselves. They never touched the threatening thing, never had their own bad experience with it, but their brain absorbed the lesson anyway through careful observation of another person's distress. This mechanism probably evolved as a safety feature, helping individuals avoid harm by learning from the mistakes and fears of their community. In everyday life, it means that alarm can sweep through a group in moments, changing everyone's behavior before a single word of explanation is spoken. The same mirror systems that spread fear can also transmit calm and confidence. Understanding how emotions flow between people gives us insight into our power to shape the collective mood of any space we enter. Throughout history, authority figures have demonstrated an unsettling ability to convince ordinary individuals to follow extreme instructions. Famous experiments from decades past revealed how readily people will obey commands that go against their moral instincts, simply because the orders come from someone they perceive as being in charge. When researchers had authority figures direct participants to deliver what appeared to be painful consequences to other people, a disturbing number complied despite obvious discomfort with their actions. The presence of someone in a position of power seemed to override personal judgment and ethical concerns. This tendency reveals something profound about human social structure and our deep programming to defer to leadership. The same impulse that helps societies function through organized hierarchy can also lead individuals down paths they would never choose independently. When we find ourselves surrounded by authority figures, something strange happens to our moral compass. The pull of hierarchy can bend our personal values in ways we never thought possible. Military units understand this deeply. Workplace cultures exploit it regularly. There's this fascinating tendency we have to hand over our moral decision-making to whoever seems like the expert in the room. The weight of responsibility, it seems, becomes lighter when we can point to someone else's orders. But here's the thing about human nature. We're not completely helpless against these forces. Once you know about this psychological pull, you can start to resist it. Maybe that's what courage really is, not the absence of fear, but the willingness to step away from the crowd and reclaim your own choices. Your eyes are doing something remarkable right now, something you probably never think about. The center of your vision, that's where all the detail lives, where you read these words, where you focus on faces. But out there in the corners, in that blurry peripheral space, your eyes are running a completely different program. They're motion detectors, incredibly fast ones. This isn't some modern adaptation either. Way back when our ancestors were scanning the savannah, that little flicker of movement in the corner of an eye could mean the difference between spotting dinner or becoming it. Those rod cells scattered around the outer edges of your retina, they're like tiny sentries, always watching, always ready to sound the alarm. Even now, in our safe modern world, this ancient system keeps working. You'll notice something moving before you consciously decide to look at it. Your brain has this early warning network, constantly scanning for change, ready to pull your attention exactly where it needs to go. In those quiet margins of sight, the past still stands guard. There's something almost meditative about putting pen to paper, something that typing on a keyboard just can't match. When you write by hand, your brain lights up in ways that feel almost luxurious. Fine motor control, visual processing, spatial awareness, they all have to work together in this intricate dance. Students who take notes by hand often remember more, even when they write down less. That's because handwriting forces you to slow down, to process, to summarize in real time. You can't just mindlessly transcribe like you might when typing. Each letter becomes a small act of engagement with the idea itself. The physical act creates something deeper too. Each pen stroke leaves an imprint, not just on the paper, but somehow in the neural pathways of memory. While our digital world prizes speed and efficiency, maybe there's wisdom in the slower path, in letting thought flow through the deliberate movement of hand across page. Here's a trick your brain plays on itself, one that might actually be useful. Even when you're not feeling particularly joyful, the simple act of forming a smile with your facial muscles can nudge your brain toward a lighter mood. It's not about fake positivity or pretending everything's fine. The muscles in your face, they're constantly sending feedback signals back to your brain, little updates about what might be happening in your emotional world. Researchers have found that people who hold a pen between their teeth, forcing their face into a smile shape, actually find cartoons funnier than people who don't. Your brain takes these physical cues seriously, interpreting them as signs of safety, of positivity. Over time, this gentle feedback loop can become a quiet tool for perspective, especially when the day feels heavy. There's something profound about the idea that we can influence our inner weather through such simple, physical acts. In less than 1/10 of a second, your brain has already decided what it thinks about a new face. Before conscious thought even has time to kick in, you've made judgments about trustworthiness, competence, likability. It happens faster than you can blink, faster than you can even realize you're doing it. This lightning-fast assessment system comes from deep evolutionary programming, from times when quickly figuring out friend versus foe could determine survival. The amygdala and other ancient brain structures process facial information at remarkable speed, drawing conclusions long before your rational mind joins the conversation. The strange thing is, these snap judgments tend to be surprisingly consistent between different people. Show the same face to a room full of strangers, and they'll often reach similar conclusions about that person's character. But consistency doesn't mean accuracy, and our minds often rely on shortcuts that can lead us astray. Our brains make snap judgments about people in just milliseconds. These split-second evaluations happen faster than we can even think about them. The mind uses old patterns and past experiences to quickly fill in what it doesn't know. This rapid-fire process shows us something profound about human nature. Part of our consciousness still runs on ancient programming, shaped long before modern life existed. Back when cities didn't exist, when screens weren't invented, when meeting a stranger could mean life or death. A single look at someone's face could determine whether you survived the encounter. Something fascinating happens when people feel like they're being watched. Even fake eyes can make us behave better. Put a picture of eyes above a charity box, and donations increase. Place an image of watchful eyes in an office, and people become more honest. The eyes don't even need to look real. Cartoon eyes, stylized drawings, simple sketches, all can trigger this response. Our brains react to these paper eyes as if they were genuine. Disconnects back to our evolutionary history, when reputation meant everything, when being part of the group determined survival. Back then, being seen meant your actions had consequences. The brain remembers this ancient truth, even today. There's something quietly powerful about how these deep social instincts still control us. We rarely notice their influence, yet they shape our choices constantly. A simple drawing becomes an invisible guardian, whispering that someone might be watching. This makes us wonder about the nature of observation itself. Does it matter if the watcher is real, or does the mere possibility of being seen change who we become? Most of us think we're more noticeable than we actually are. This phenomenon has a name: the spotlight effect. We imagine others are watching us closely, judging our every move. When we trip on the sidewalk, we feel embarrassed, assuming everyone saw. When we mispronounce a word, we think the whole room noticed. But here's the reality: most people are too busy thinking about themselves to focus on us. We're the main character in our own story, so we assume others see us the same way. They don't, though. Their attention is turned inward, focused on their own concerns, their own worries, their own lives. Understanding this can feel liberating. Those small mistakes we make, they carry less weight than we think. Our stumbles and slip-ups often go unnoticed. This knowledge can reduce anxiety, make social situations feel less threatening. When we realize the imagined audience doesn't really exist, we can move through life with more confidence. The spotlight we think is shining on us, it's mostly in our own minds. Something seemingly impossible happens with fake medicine. Placebos can work even when people know they're fake. Studies show this over and over. Give someone a sugar pill, tell them it's not real medicine, yet they still feel better. Pain decreases, mood improves, symptoms fade. How can this happen when there's no deception involved? The answer lies in expectation and ritual. The act of taking treatment, combined with belief in the body's healing power, actually changes brain chemistry. These changes can influence physical states in measurable ways. This reveals something profound about the connection between mind and body. They're not separate systems, they're deeply intertwined. Belief can literally shape biology. Awareness itself becomes a form of medicine. The ritual of care, the ceremony of healing, these things have power beyond the physical components. It makes us question what healing really means. Is medicine just chemistry, or is there something more mysterious at work? Memory works in strange ways. We remember feelings much better than facts. Think about a significant moment from your past. You probably recall the emotions clearly: the joy, the sadness, the excitement, the fear, but the specific details, the exact sequence of events, these fade more quickly. This happens because emotions get processed in brain areas closely linked to memory formation. The amygdala, which handles emotions, works closely with memory centers. This partnership makes emotional memories stickier, easier to retrieve later. While this emotional focus helps us learn from experiences, it also distorts our recollections. We remember how something felt, but we lose track of what actually happened. Two people can share the same experience, yet recall it completely differently. One person's memory of an argument might focus on feeling hurt, while another remembers feeling angry. Same event, different emotional filters, different memories. This raises questions about the nature of truth itself. If our memories are colored by emotion, how reliable are they? In the story we tell ourselves about our lives, emotion acts like ink, while details are just paper. The feelings write the narrative, and without them, the facts become harder to retrieve. Perhaps this isn't a flaw in human design, but a feature. Maybe remembering how things felt matters more than remembering exactly what happened. Our minds are constantly editing themselves, and forgetting plays a starring role in this endless revision. While we often think of forgetting as a failure, it's actually one of the brain's most sophisticated tools. Every single day, your brain encounters more information than it could possibly store. If we remembered every conversation, every advertisement, every mundane detail, our minds would become cluttered warehouses of irrelevant data. Instead, the brain acts like a careful curator, deciding what deserves a permanent place in the gallery of memory. This process of letting go serves a deeper purpose than just making space. When we forget the specific details of past experiences, we're left with broader patterns and lessons. Think about learning to ride a bicycle. You don't need to remember every wobble, every near fall from your first attempts. What matters is the general skill, the muscle memory, the confidence that comes from knowing you can balance on two wheels. Forgetting the frustrating specifics allows the essential knowledge to shine through. Scientists compare this selective forgetting to pruning a garden. Just as a gardener removes dead branches to help healthy ones flourish, our brains trim away outdated or unnecessary memories to keep our mental landscape vibrant and useful. Old phone numbers fade away when we get new ones. Embarrassing moments from childhood lose their sting over time. Meanwhile, the memories that truly shaped us, the ones that taught us important lessons about ourselves and the world, those tend to stick around. The brain's relationship with reality is far stranger than most people realize. Consider what happened in some remarkable experiments where volunteers wore special glasses that flipped their entire visual world upside down. At first, as you might expect, everything felt completely wrong. Walking became treacherous. Reaching for objects turned into a confusing game of trial and error. But here's where it gets fascinating. Within just a few days, their brains adapted completely. The upside-down world started feeling normal again. This wasn't just getting used to being disoriented. The volunteers genuinely perceived the world as right side up, even though their eyes were still receiving inverted images. When they finally removed the glasses, their normal vision felt wrong until their brains readjusted once more. This incredible flexibility shows us something profound about perception itself. What we think of as simply seeing the world is actually an active process of construction and interpretation. Your brain doesn't just receive visual information like a passive camera. It's constantly making predictions, filling in gaps, and creating a coherent picture from fragments of sensory data. The space where your optic nerve connects to your retina creates a blind spot in each eye, but you never notice it because your brain seamlessly fills in the missing information. Reality as we experience it is always a collaboration between the world outside and the world inside our heads. This becomes even more obvious when we look at optical illusions. Those images that seem to move when they're perfectly still, or lines that appear different lengths when they're actually identical. These aren't tricks being played on our eyes. They're revealing the shortcuts our brains use to process visual information quickly. Most of the time, these shortcuts serve us incredibly well. They help us recognize faces in dim light, spot movement in our peripheral vision, and navigate complex environments without conscious effort. But illusions remind us that every perception is, in a sense, a best guess. Your brain takes incomplete information and creates what feels like a complete picture of reality. Two people can look at the same scene and literally see different things, not because their eyes are different, but because their brains are interpreting the same visual data through different filters of experience and expectation. When we shift from individual minds to group minds, the picture becomes even more complex. There's a curious phenomenon where groups of people often make riskier decisions than any individual in the group would make alone. It's as if something about being part of a collective emboldens us to take chances we'd normally avoid. This happens partly because discussion tends to amplify whatever opinion is already leaning toward dominance in the group. Imagine a business meeting where everyone is already somewhat excited about a risky new venture. As they discuss it, that excitement builds on itself. Concerns get downplayed, potential problems seem less serious, and the group momentum carries everyone toward a bolder choice than they might make in private. This isn't necessarily bad. Some of humanity's greatest achievements probably came from groups willing to take calculated risks together. That it shows how the social dynamics of decision-making can override individual caution. The group mind has its own personality, distinct from the individuals who make it up. Understanding this can help us use collective decision-making more wisely. Sometimes we need that group energy to push past excessive caution. Other times, we need to deliberately slow down and make space for dissenting voices before the momentum becomes unstoppable. Laughter offers us another window into how our brains can be rewired for better living. When we laugh, really laugh, our brains don't just register amusement. They launch into a complex chemical response that can actually change how we handle stress and difficulty. The simple act of laughing releases endorphins, those natural feel-good chemicals that can lift our mood for hours afterward. But laughter does something even more interesting than just making us feel better in the moment. Regular laughter, the kind that comes from finding genuine humor in life's absurdities, seems to build a kind of mental resilience. People who laugh more often tend to bounce back from setbacks more quickly, not because they don't take problems seriously, but because humor gives them a different perspective on those problems. Laughter works like medicine for your nervous system. When you laugh, your body releases endorphins, those natural feel-good chemicals that wash through your bloodstream. But something deeper happens too. Each moment of genuine laughter acts like a small training session, teaching your stress response system how to bounce back faster from difficult situations. Think about it this way: every time you share a laugh with someone, you're not just enjoying the moment, you're actually strengthening the social bonds that become your safety net during tough times. These connections matter more than we often realize. They create a web of support that can carry you through challenges you never saw coming. The fascinating thing is, laughter seems to accumulate in your body somehow. Like deposits in a bank account, these moments of joy store themselves away, ready to help you when life demands courage. Your nervous system remembers these experiences, building resilience one chuckle at a time. Scientists have discovered something remarkable about people who wake up each morning with a clear sense of purpose. They tend to live longer, healthier lives. This isn't just about motivation, though that certainly plays a part. Having purpose seems to work directly on your biology, lowering inflammation markers throughout your body and keeping your heart healthier. The beautiful thing about purpose is that it doesn't need to be grand or world-changing. Maybe your purpose is caring for family members, or creating art that speaks to you, or simply contributing to your local community in small ways. What matters is having something meaningful to work toward, something that acts like a compass for your mind. During hardship, purpose becomes like a steady light on the horizon. It gives you a reason to keep taking those steps forward, one day at a time, even when the path feels unclear. There's something profoundly human about this need for meaning, this drive to find reasons beyond ourselves. Hidden deep in your temporal lobe sits one of the most specialized networks in your entire brain. The fusiform face area is devoted entirely to recognizing faces, and it's incredibly fast at its job. In less than a second, this network can pick out a familiar face in a crowded room, processing features and matching them to memories stored throughout your brain. When this system gets damaged, people develop something called prosopagnosia, or face blindness. They can see all the individual features, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, but somehow can't put them together to recognize even their closest friends or family members. It's a reminder of how much we take this ability for granted. This face recognition network tells us something important about human evolution. Reading faces has always been crucial for survival, helping us detect emotions, recognize allies, and build the social bonds that keep communities together. But here's what's really interesting: this system doesn't limit itself to human faces. It can adapt to recognize the markings on your pet or the familiar shape of objects you see every day. Your brain has invested heavily in connection, shaping itself around the ability to recognize what matters most to you. It's like having a specialized filing system just for the faces and forms that populate your world. Meditation does something remarkable to your brain's physical structure. This isn't just about feeling calmer during practice, though that certainly happens. Long-term meditators show actual changes in their brain tissue when scientists examine them with MRI scanners. The prefrontal cortex, that area responsible for decision-making and self-control, becomes thicker with regular meditation practice. The hippocampus, crucial for memory and learning, shows changes too. Perhaps most interesting of all, the amygdala, your brain's alarm center for fear and stress, actually shrinks with consistent practice. These physical changes reflect something called neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to rewire itself based on what you do repeatedly. Even short daily sessions can begin shifting neural patterns, enhancing your ability to focus, regulate emotions, and maintain overall well-being. In our rushed, noisy world, meditation offers a way to literally reshape your mind from the inside out. You're not just practicing relaxation, you're building stillness into the very structure of your brain tissue. Sometimes, under specific circumstances, people report the strangest sensation of leaving their own bodies. This happens during near-death experiences, deep meditative states, or even when scientists stimulate certain brain regions in laboratory settings. People describe floating above themselves, watching their own body from an outside perspective. These out-of-body experiences challenge our usual understanding of consciousness and self-awareness. They suggest that our sense of being located inside our physical body might be more flexible than we typically imagine. The brain constructs our sense of self and location in space, and under certain conditions, this construction can shift dramatically. The mind sometimes plays curious tricks on us, creating moments where we seem to float outside ourselves. People describe watching their own bodies from above, as if they've become invisible observers of their own lives. The brain area called the temporal parietal junction appears central to these strange episodes. When this region gets disrupted, our usual sense of where we are in space can completely unravel. These out-of-body moments feel incredibly real to those experiencing them, even though they typically last just seconds or minutes. What's fascinating is how these experiences can fundamentally shift someone's understanding of who they are. The very notion of self, something we take for granted, suddenly becomes fluid and questionable. Whether you interpret these moments as spiritual journeys or simply neurological glitches, they reveal something profound about consciousness itself. Our brains are constantly being shaped by invisible influences around us. Words we read, images we glimpse, even subtle environmental cues can alter our behavior without us knowing. Scientists call this priming, and it operates like a hidden puppet master pulling strings we can't see. Someone who reads words about politeness will actually interrupt others, less in conversations afterward. People exposed to concepts about aging will literally walk more slowly down hallways. The brain uses these recently encountered ideas as mental shortcuts, quietly steering our thoughts and actions. These effects usually fade quickly, but they show just how permeable our minds really are. Every room we enter, every conversation we have, sets invisible parameters for how we'll think and behave next. The space around us whispers constant suggestions to our subconscious mind. Sometimes these nudges inspire creativity or productivity. Other times they might subtly influence us in ways we'd rather not be influenced. It makes you wonder how much of what we consider our authentic choices are actually responses to environmental programming we never noticed. Human kindness creates ripple effects that extend far beyond good feelings. When we help others, our bodies respond with measurable changes. Lower blood pressure, reduced stress hormones, stronger immune responses. The hormone oxytocin floods our system during acts of compassion, creating warmth and trust while simultaneously protecting our cardiovascular health. Even tiny gestures, holding doors open, sharing genuine smiles, can trigger these biological benefits. What emerges is a beautiful cycle where doing good makes us feel better, which makes us more likely to keep doing good. Kindness becomes both social medicine and personal healthcare, wrapped into one invisible package. There's something almost magical about how caring for others ends up caring for ourselves. Evolution seems to have wired us so that our well-being becomes intertwined with the well-being of those around us. Perhaps this explains why isolated communities often struggle with health problems, while connected, generous communities tend to thrive. The way we arrange our physical bodies sends constant messages to our brains about how we should feel. Standing tall and straight can literally boost confidence and mental alertness. Slouching, by contrast, seems to reinforce feelings of tiredness and low mood. These aren't just correlations, they're active feedback loops between physical posture and mental state. Our hormone levels shift based on how we hold ourselves. Our breathing patterns change. Even our neural activity responds to whether we're upright or collapsed. Some research suggests that power poses, expansive postures that take up space, can increase feelings of personal control. Though scientists continue debating exactly how strong these effects are, what's clear is that posture influences energy by either opening up or restricting our chest and diaphragm. Small adjustments, straightening the spine, dropping the shoulders, lifting the head slightly, can subtly redirect the mind toward greater clarity. In many ways, our bodies become the foundation upon which our mental stories get built. Sometimes the most painful experiences in life become doorways to unexpected growth. Trauma, despite causing deep suffering, occasionally transforms people in remarkable ways. Some individuals emerge from terrible circumstances with greater resilience than they ever imagined possible. Others develop profound empathy, having walked through darkness themselves. Still, others discover inner strengths they never knew existed. This doesn't mean trauma is good or necessary, just that human beings possess extraordinary abilities to find meaning and growth, even in the worst situations. The brain's capacity to reorganize itself after injury or stress speaks to something fundamental about human nature. We're not fixed entities, we're constantly evolving systems capable of adapting to almost anything life throws at us. Perhaps our greatest superpower isn't avoiding difficulty, but rather our ability to be transformed by it in ways that ultimately serve not just ourselves, but everyone whose lives we touch afterward. Sometimes, when people face their darkest moments, something unexpected happens afterward. They don't just bounce back to where they were before. They actually grow beyond their previous limits. This isn't saying that terrible experiences are good for us, because they're not. But the human mind has this remarkable ability to sometimes forge something stronger from the broken pieces. Researchers call this post-traumatic growth, and it shows up in fascinating ways. People report feeling closer to their loved ones than ever before. They start noticing beauty in ordinary moments, things they used to rush past without seeing. Their sense of what really matters becomes crystal clear, like wiping fog off a window. The key seems to be meaning-making. Our brains are constantly trying to weave our experiences into a story that makes sense. When something shattering happens, we eventually find ways to fit it into our larger narrative. Not everyone goes through this transformation, but those who do often describe it like a tree that grows stronger after weathering a fierce storm. Here's something that might change how you think about the people around you. Stress jumps between humans, like an invisible contagion. You don't need to hear someone's words to catch their anxiety. Your brain picks up on the smallest signals: a tight jaw, shoulders pulled up toward the ears, even subtle changes in breathing patterns. This happens because we're wired for empathy at a level deeper than conscious thought. Our nervous systems are constantly scanning, tuning into the emotional frequency of nearby people. It's an ancient survival mechanism, helping groups detect danger collectively. But in modern life, it means one person's stress can ripple through an entire office or family dinner. The beautiful flip side is that calm spreads too. When someone maintains their inner steadiness, others feel it and relax in response. Managing your own emotional state becomes a quiet service to everyone you encounter. Something interesting happens when you're the only person who witnesses someone in trouble. You help. No hesitation, no looking around to see what others will do. There's just you and someone who needs assistance, and that clarity cuts through everything else. This contrasts sharply with what happens in crowds. When multiple people see the same emergency, they often freeze. Everyone assumes someone else will take action. Psychologists call this the bystander effect, and it's surprisingly powerful. But when you're alone with the situation, ancient programming kicks in. Back when humans lived in small groups, every person's contribution was essential for survival. That instinct still runs deep. There's something profound about those moments, when social complexity falls away and we respond from our most fundamental human nature. Your body language speaks a language you might not even realize you're fluent in. When you unconsciously match someone's posture or mirror their gestures, you're participating in an ancient dance of connection. Scientists call this the chameleon effect, and it happens automatically when we feel comfortable with someone. Watch two friends having coffee sometime. They'll lean in at the same moment, gesture in similar rhythms, even match each other's energy levels. This mirroring isn't manipulation. It's empathy made visible. Your nervous system is saying, without words, that you're tuned into this other person's experience. Professional negotiators sometimes use this deliberately, and therapists rely on it to build trust. But when it's forced or overdone, people sense the artificiality immediately. Natural mirroring flows like synchronized swimming, two people finding the same rhythm, following music only they can hear. Every time you learn something new, your brain physically reconstructs itself. It's not just storing information, like filing papers in a cabinet. The actual structure changes, neurons reaching out to form new connections, pathways strengthening with practice. This process, called neuroplasticity, means your brain at 60 can be dramatically different from your brain at 20. Learn to play guitar, and specific regions will literally grow larger. Study a second language, and areas responsible for executive control become more robust. Even simple activities, like following a new recipe or taking a different route to work, spark these changes. Your brain treats every novel experience as an opportunity to rewire itself. It's constantly adapting, reshaping, becoming something new, based on what you choose to focus on. This adaptability doesn't diminish with age, the way we once thought. Older brains show remarkable capacity for change, sometimes even greater creativity, as they draw on decades of accumulated connections. The notion that we're stuck with the brain we were born with turns out to be completely wrong. The human brain possesses this remarkable ability to reshape itself continuously throughout our entire existence. Scientists call this neuroplasticity, and it's perhaps one of the most hopeful discoveries about how our minds work. When we learn something new, whether it's a language or how to juggle, our brains actually build stronger connections between neurons. Sometimes, they even create completely fresh pathways that didn't exist before. Think of it like walking through an untamed forest. The first time you make your way through, you're pushing aside branches, stepping over logs, creating a faint trail. But if you walk that same path over and over, eventually you've carved out a clear, well-worn route. That's essentially what happens inside our heads when we practice something repeatedly. Scientists have used brain imaging technology to watch this process happen in real time. They've studied people learning to juggle, mastering new languages, solving complex puzzles. What they found is truly fascinating. Certain regions of the brain actually grow larger as people develop these skills. It's not an overnight transformation, but rather a gradual accumulation of tiny changes that eventually become permanent features of our mental landscape. Here's something that might surprise you. This capacity for growth doesn't simply vanish as we get older. Sure, it might slow down compared to when we were children, but it never completely disappears. Even in our later years, our brains maintain this incredible potential to adapt and expand. Every single skill we acquire leaves behind a physical trace, like a quiet signature written into the very structure of our minds. There's something almost poetic about how our experiences literally reshape who we are, down to the microscopic level. Each time we learn something new, we're not just gaining knowledge, we're actually becoming a slightly different person, neurologically speaking. Now here's a practical discovery that researchers have made about memory. Where you study or practice something can dramatically affect how well you remember it later. This happens because our brains are constantly picking up on subtle details from our environment, things we're not even consciously aware of. The lighting in the room, the sounds in the background, even the smell in the air, all of these become woven into the memory itself. So when you try to recall that information later, you have all these extra threads to pull on. It's like having multiple keys to the same lock. If you always study in the exact same spot, you're only giving your brain one set of environmental cues to work with. But if you mix it up, studying sometimes in your bedroom, sometimes at a coffee shop, sometimes outdoors, you're creating a much richer web of associations. Each location adds its own unique flavor to the memory. This principle extends far beyond just studying for tests. Musicians who practice in different rooms often perform better in unfamiliar venues. Athletes who train in varied conditions tend to adapt more quickly during actual competitions. There's something profound about how our minds use context as a scaffolding for memory. In a way, this makes us realize how interconnected we are with our surroundings. We're not just isolated brains floating in space, but creatures deeply embedded in our environments, constantly drawing meaning from the world around us. Here's another fascinating aspect of how learning works. When you explain something to another person, you end up understanding it better yourself. Teachers have known this for centuries, but scientists have only recently begun to understand why it happens. The act of teaching forces your brain to organize information in a completely different way. You have to anticipate questions, find simple language for complex ideas, create logical sequences that make sense to someone else. All of this mental work strengthens your own grasp of the material. There's even a name for this phenomenon. Researchers call it the protégé effect, and it reveals something beautiful about human nature. Knowledge isn't meant to be hoarded like treasure in a vault. Instead, it grows stronger when it's shared, like a flame that lights other candles without dimming itself. When you prepare to teach someone else, your brain engages with information in a more purposeful, structured way. You're not just passively reviewing facts, you're actively reconstructing them, breathing new life into what you thought you already knew. This works for practical skills too. Show a friend how to change a tire, and you'll find your own understanding of the process becomes clearer. Teach someone to cook your favorite recipe, and your own muscle memory becomes more refined. In this exchange, both people walk away enriched. There's something deeply human about this process, this way that knowledge becomes more real when it's given away rather than kept private. It suggests that perhaps we're meant to learn not just for ourselves, but as part of a larger community of minds. Now let's shift to something that might seem unrelated, but actually reveals another layer of how our brains work. Certain fears seem to be hardwired into us from birth, passed down through countless generations of human ancestors. Take the fear of snakes, for example, or spiders, or steep heights. Even people who have never had a bad experience with these things often feel an instinctive wariness around them. Children who have grown up in cities, who have barely seen a real snake, still tend to react with caution when they encounter one. Evolutionary psychologists believe these fears served our ancestors well. In ancient environments, being naturally cautious around venomous creatures or dangerous heights could mean the difference between survival and death. Those who possessed these instincts were more likely to live long enough to pass on their genes. What's remarkable is how these ancient survival mechanisms still operate in our modern world. Even though most of us rarely encounter truly dangerous snakes or need to climb treacherous cliffs, our nervous systems carry within them whispers from a past we can barely imagine, echoes of challenges our species faced thousands of years ago. This inheritance shows us that we're not blank slates when we're born. We come into the world already equipped with certain emotional responses, shaped by the long history of human survival. In some ways, our fears are a form of genetic memory, a library of caution written in our cells. It makes you wonder what other invisible influences from our evolutionary past still guide our thoughts and feelings today. How much of what we think is uniquely our own is actually shared across all humanity, carved into us by the experiences of countless generations. Finally, here's something that might challenge how you think about productivity. Despite what our fast-paced world might suggest, trying to juggle multiple tasks at once usually backfires when it comes to forming solid memories. When we switch rapidly between different activities, our attention gets fragmented. Each task receives only a portion of our mental resources, like trying to water several plants with a single watering can by constantly moving it around. The result is that none of the plants, none of the tasks, get the full attention they need to truly flourish. This fragmentation doesn't just affect our performance in the moment. It actually impacts how well we remember what we've done. Memories formed under divided attention tend to be weaker, less detailed, more prone to errors. There's something almost meditative about giving our full presence to one thing at a time. In a culture that celebrates multitasking as a virtue, perhaps true wisdom lies in rediscovering the power of singular focus. When we allow ourselves to be completely absorbed in one activity, we create the optimal conditions for deep learning and lasting memory formation. It's a reminder that sometimes slowing down is the fastest way to truly get somewhere meaningful. When your attention gets pulled in different directions, something fascinating happens inside your head. The brain starts dividing its resources, kind of like trying to water multiple plants with one small watering can. Each mental task gets less fuel, less focus, less of what it needs to stick around in your memory. Think about it. When you're texting while watching a movie, neither activity gets your full processing power. The result is pretty predictable. You remember less of both experiences. This scattered attention creates another curious problem. You might remember a piece of information perfectly well, but have no clue where it came from. Was it from that podcast? Or did someone mention it at lunch? Your brain recorded the facts, but forgot to tag the source. It's like finding a photo in your pocket with no idea who gave it to you. When multitasking becomes a habit, your mind starts preferring the surface level of many things, rather than diving deep into one thing. It's almost like training yourself to be perpetually distracted. The ability to focus intensely on a single task, to really sink your teeth into it, starts to fade away. There's something almost meditative about doing just one thing at a time. Your brain can pour all its energy into that single stream of thought, encoding it properly, filing it away, where you can actually find it later. In a world that constantly demands we juggle 15 things at once, maybe the most radical thing we can do is focus on just one. Time has this strange, elastic quality that most of us have noticed but rarely think about deeply. Minutes can feel like hours when you're in danger, or when you're completely absorbed in something challenging. Your brain suddenly becomes hyper-aware, recording way more details than usual, almost like switching from regular speed to slow-motion recording. But then there are those afternoons that just disappear. You sit down to check email, and suddenly it's dark outside. Routine activities barely register in our consciousness, so they leave almost no trace in memory. When you try to remember what happened, there's just this vague blur where 3 hours used to be. Children experience time completely differently than adults do. And there's a beautiful reason for this. When you're 5 years old, summer vacation really does last forever, because everything is new. Every day brings experiences your brain has never processed before. Each moment gets filed away as significant, worth remembering, worth the mental storage space. As we get older, more and more of life becomes familiar. The same commute, the same breakfast, the same conversations. Our brains start skipping over these repeated patterns, saving energy for truly novel information. The result is that years can start feeling like they pass in the blink of an eye. But here's the thing, you can actually slow time down again. When you deliberately seek out new experiences, try unfamiliar foods, take different routes, engage with ideas that challenge you, time stretches back out. Your brain wakes up, starts paying attention again. Suddenly there's more richness, more texture to each day. Scientists have discovered something that sounds like science fiction. They can actually weaken specific memories in laboratory animals by interrupting a very particular process. When you recall a memory, it doesn't just play back like a recording. It actually gets taken apart and rebuilt, filed away fresh. During this rebuilding phase, memories are vulnerable, changeable. Researchers have learned to interfere with this process, using targeted chemicals, to make certain memories fade or lose their emotional punch. The implications are staggering. Imagine being able to dial down the intensity of traumatic experiences or help someone move past painful associations that keep them stuck. But this power raises some pretty profound questions. If we can edit our memories, what happens to the lessons we've learned from difficult experiences? Are painful memories always something to be erased? Or do they serve some essential purpose in shaping who we become? The research suggests that memory isn't this fixed, permanent recording we imagine it to be. It's more like a living document, constantly being revised. Your brain has a remarkable talent for creating memories of things that never actually happened, and these false memories can feel absolutely, completely real. Not vague or fuzzy, but detailed, emotional, convincing. Scientists have managed to implant entirely fictional childhood memories in people, complete with sensory details and emotional responses. This happens because memory isn't really like a video camera. Every time you remember something, your brain reconstructs it from scattered pieces, filling in gaps with assumptions and expectations. Usually this works fine, but sometimes the reconstruction process goes wrong, and you end up with a memory of something that's part truth, part imagination. People can become completely convinced they experienced events that never occurred. They'll describe these false memories with confidence, including specific details about what they saw, heard, and felt. It's a humbling reminder that our own experience, the thing we trust most, isn't always reliable. Right now, as you're processing these words, there's a spot in each eye where you can't see anything at all. It's where your optic nerve connects to your retina, creating a little blind zone in your visual field. But you've probably never noticed it, because your brain is constantly performing an amazing magic trick. Your visual system looks at the area around each blind spot and makes educated guesses about what should be there. It fills in the missing information so seamlessly that the gap becomes invisible. This isn't just happening at your blind spots either. Your brain is constantly smoothing over tiny interruptions in your vision, painting over the moments when you blink, compensating for shadows and obstacles. In a way, what you think you're seeing is partly real and partly a very sophisticated hallucination, a best guess about reality that your brain constructs moment by moment. It's so convincing that most people go their entire lives without realizing it's happening. When you open your eyes each morning, you might think you're seeing the world exactly as it is, but your brain is constantly editing reality, much like a film director cuts and splices footage to create a story. The visual world around you isn't a direct recording, it's a carefully constructed interpretation. Your mind fills in gaps, smooths over inconsistencies, and presents you with what it thinks you need to see. This polished version feels seamless, but it's really more like watching a movie than looking through a window. The raw data coming through your eyes gets processed, filtered, and organized before it reaches your consciousness. In a strange way, we're all living inside our brain's creative interpretation of what's out there. There's something almost magical about how your own name cuts through noise. Even in the loudest restaurant or crowded party, when someone says your name from across the room, your brain immediately picks it up. This cocktail party effect happens because your name triggers a specific area in your brain called the medial prefrontal cortex. It's the same region that lights up when you think about yourself or reflect on your identity. Your name isn't just a word, it's deeply wired into your sense of who you are. The response is automatic, almost like your brain has a personal alarm system that's always listening. This sensitivity probably helped our ancestors survive, since hearing your name meant someone needed your attention, possibly for something important or dangerous. The brain has a tendency to form quick judgments about people and situations, often without us even noticing. These implicit biases happen automatically, operating beneath our conscious awareness like underground currents. Even people who genuinely believe in fairness and equality carry these hidden associations. The surprising thing is how resistant these biases are to change. Simply knowing they exist doesn't make them disappear. But awareness does give us a chance to slow down our decisions, question our first impressions, and seek out different perspectives. It's like learning to spot a riptide at the beach. Once you know it's there, you can choose how to swim through it. Humans are remarkably social creatures, and this shows up in how easily our opinions can shift based on the people around us. In famous psychology experiments, participants would give obviously wrong answers to simple questions, just because everyone else in the group was doing the same thing. The pull toward conformity gets stronger when a group is unanimous, or when we feel uncertain about something. This tendency isn't necessarily bad. It helps societies function and creates shared understanding, but it can also lead us away from our own judgment, making us prioritize fitting in over being accurate. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is stick to what you know is true, even when everyone around you disagrees. While your body rests at night, your brain stays busy reorganizing the day's experiences and making new connections. Sleep allows your mind to explore unusual associations that might not occur during waking hours. This is why solutions to difficult problems sometimes appear in dreams, or why morning brings clarity to issues that seemed impossible the night before. During certain sleep stages, your brain becomes freer to wander and experiment, unbound by the logical constraints of consciousness. Many famous discoveries and creative breakthroughs have emerged from this nighttime mental activity. Artists wake up with new ideas, scientists dream of molecular structures, inventors visualize solutions that eluded them during the day. In essence, sleep gives your brain permission to think in ways that daylight logic might not allow. When we drift into sleep, something remarkable happens beneath the surface of consciousness. The brain doesn't simply shut down. It becomes a master architect, quietly rearranging the day's experiences. Sleep transforms scattered thoughts into unexpected connections, weaving together ideas that seemed unrelated during waking hours. It's during these quiet moments that creative breakthroughs often emerge. The mind works like an invisible craftsman, finding patterns hidden from our conscious awareness. What appears to be rest is actually intense mental activity, a behind-the-scenes workshop where tomorrow's insights are being carefully constructed. Perhaps there's something profound about surrendering control to allow creativity to flourish. We live in a world that celebrates constant activity, yet some of our most brilliant moments come when we step back and let the mind wander freely. Your sense of taste exists in a fascinating partnership that most people never fully appreciate. The tongue, despite all its importance, can only distinguish 5 basic sensations: sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and that savory quality we call umami. Everything else, all those complex flavors that make food memorable, comes from somewhere entirely different. Your nose carries the real responsibility for flavor. Those thousands of subtle taste experiences, they're actually smell working in disguise. When you catch a cold and food suddenly becomes boring, you're experiencing this partnership in reverse. The brain takes these 2 separate signals, taste and aroma, and blends them into something that feels like a single sensation. This collaboration goes deeper than simple flavor detection. Smell connects directly to memory centers in ways that other senses don't. That's why a particular dish can instantly transport you decades into the past, to a specific kitchen, a certain season, even a particular conversation. There's something beautiful about how our senses refuse to work alone, always reaching across boundaries to create richer experiences than any single input could provide. The act of teaching creates an unexpected gift for the teacher. When you explain something to another person, even casually, your brain must work harder than when simply absorbing information. It has to organize knowledge, find clear pathways through complex ideas, and present them in ways another mind can understand. This process, which researchers call the protégé effect, strengthens memory in ways that passive learning never could. Every explanation forces active recall, pulling information from storage and examining it from new angles. Gaps in understanding become visible when you try to teach, creating opportunities for deeper learning. Even informal teaching counts. Describing a documentary to a friend, explaining a concept to a colleague, sharing something interesting you learned. All of these moments transform loose knowledge into solid understanding. The information becomes more than something you once heard. It becomes part of your mental framework. Perhaps this reveals something important about human nature. We're not just individual learning machines. We're meant to share knowledge, to build understanding together. Learning spread across time creates stronger memories than concentrated effort. This spacing effect challenges our instincts about efficiency. It seems logical that focusing intensely should produce better results, but the brain works differently than we might expect. When learning sessions are separated by days or weeks, each return to the material forces the mind to work harder. Retrieving information that has started to fade requires more mental effort, and this effort strengthens the neural pathways involved. What feels like forgetting and relearning is actually a more robust form of memory formation. This principle applies beyond formal education. Skills, languages, even creative abilities benefit from regular spaced practice rather than marathon sessions. The brain seems to prefer gentle, consistent pressure over intense bursts of activity. There's something humbling about discovering that our intuitions about learning efficiency can be so wrong, yet also encouraging that small, regular efforts can be more powerful than we imagine. A simple smile can change your internal chemistry, even when you don't feel particularly happy. The facial feedback hypothesis suggests that expressions don't just reflect emotions, they can actually create them. When facial muscles form a smile, they trigger the release of mood-lifting chemicals like dopamine and serotonin. Researchers have tested this by having people hold pens between their teeth, forcing their faces into smile-like positions. These participants found jokes funnier than people whose faces were positioned into frowns. The body was literally influencing the mind's interpretation of humor. This doesn't mean smiling can cure serious emotional difficulties, but it does suggest that our physical actions and mental states exist in constant dialogue. Sometimes the conversation starts with the body speaking first, then the mind listening and responding. It's a reminder that we're not just thinking beings trapped in physical shells, we're integrated systems where every part influences every other part. Doodling, often dismissed as distraction, can actually anchor attention in surprising ways. When people doodle while listening to boring information, they often remember more details than those who try to focus through willpower alone. The gentle, repetitive motion seems to occupy just enough mental space to prevent the mind from wandering completely. This works because attention has natural limits and unused mental capacity tends to drift toward more interesting thoughts. A small, mindless activity can fill that excess space without demanding the focus needed for the main task. For some people, the quiet rhythm of drawing simple shapes creates a bridge between wandering thoughts and important information. There's something almost meditative about this process, the way simple repetitive motion can create calm focus rather than distraction. Perhaps our brains need gentle activity to maintain sustained attention, like a metronome, keeping mental time. These insights into how our minds actually work reveal something profound about human nature. We're not the rational, predictable machines we sometimes imagine ourselves to be. Instead, we're complex, interconnected systems, where sleep creates breakthrough moments, teaching strengthens the teacher, simple movements anchor attention, facial expressions shape emotions, and senses collaborate to create experiences richer than their individual parts. Understanding these hidden processes doesn't diminish the mystery of consciousness. It deepens our appreciation for the elegant complexity operating beneath everyday awareness. The brain does something curious with memories. It tests them by making them harder to access. When you space out your practice sessions instead of cramming everything at once, you force your mind to work a little harder each time it retrieves information. That effort, that slight struggle to remember, actually strengthens the neural pathways like muscles growing under resistance. The forgetting that happens between sessions isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature. Your brain lets some details fade, just enough that pulling them back requires real work, and that work carves the memory deeper. It's like the difference between drawing lines in sand that wash away with the next wave, versus chiseling letters into marble that last for centuries. There's something almost unsettling about how decisions form in our minds. Brain scanners can peek inside our skulls and spot the beginnings of a choice several seconds before we actually feel like we're choosing. The electrical patterns start shifting, neurons begin their dance, and the decision takes shape in regions we can't consciously access. Only later does our aware mind catch up and claim ownership of what was already set in motion. It doesn't mean we're just biological robots following a script, but it does suggest that consciousness might be more like a narrator than a director, telling us the story of choices that deeper parts of our brain have already begun to make. Some people experience the world through senses that blend together in ways most of us can barely imagine. When they hear a trumpet, they might see gold and yellow spreading across their vision. A friend's voice could carry wisps of purple, or the sound of rain might paint everything in soft silver. This crossing of wires, this synesthetic mixing, happens because certain brains are wired with extra connections between regions that usually stay separate. The visual cortex talks to the auditory cortex in ways that create these beautiful, consistent experiences. For someone with this gift, music becomes a light show, and every conversation comes with its own color palette dancing at the edges of sight. Our minds have evolved to be gossip collectors, and there's actually a reason for this that goes back thousands of years. Information about other people, their relationships, their successes and failures, sticks in memory far better than dry facts or abstract concepts. This isn't just idle chatter. It's a survival mechanism from our ancestors who lived in small groups, where knowing everyone's reputation could mean the difference between life and death. Who could you trust to share food during lean times? Who might betray the group to outsiders? Who had the skills to help during a crisis? These social maps were literally matters of survival, so our brains became exceptionally good at encoding and remembering stories about human behavior. The way we frame an experience in our minds can completely transform how it affects us emotionally. When something stressful happens, we have a choice in how we interpret it, and that choice ripples through our entire nervous system. A job interview can be seen as a threat to our self-worth, or as a chance to learn about a new opportunity. A difficult conversation can feel like an attack, or like information we needed to hear. This mental reframing, this shift in perspective, actually changes brain activity in measurable ways. The prefrontal cortex, that thoughtful, rational part of our mind, becomes more active and helps calm down the amygdala. The stressful event doesn't disappear, but our relationship to it changes, and sometimes that's enough to transform suffering into growth. Creativity seems to bloom in the strangest conditions. When your mind is slightly foggy from tiredness, when your usual mental filters are running at lower power, ideas can slip through that would normally get blocked by your more alert, critical thinking. The tired brain makes looser associations, connects dots that the fully awake mind might never link together. It's as if mental exhaustion temporarily weakens the walls between different concepts, allowing them to mix and combine in novel ways. This doesn't mean you should make important decisions when exhausted, but it does suggest that those moments when your thoughts feel a little scattered might actually be windows of creative opportunity, times when your mind can wander into territories it wouldn't normally explore. Mental filters naturally become more porous when fatigue sets in, creating unexpected pathways for thoughts to flow. The brain's usual gatekeeping mechanisms relax their grip, allowing ideas to mingle in ways they normally wouldn't. This loosening creates fertile ground for creative breakthroughs, those moments when solutions appear from seemingly nowhere. The tired mind, freed from its typical constraints, can stumble upon connections that a well-rested brain might dismiss too quickly. There's something profound about this dance between exhaustion and innovation. The very state we often fight against, the drowsy twilight between alertness and sleep, becomes a gateway to originality. Many breakthrough discoveries have emerged from these liminal moments, when the mind drifts just far enough from conventional thinking to glimpse new possibilities. It suggests that our mental limitations might sometimes be self-imposed, maintained by the very sharpness we prize so highly. Social harmony exerts a magnetic pull on human judgment, often stronger than logic itself. When faced with group consensus, individual minds tend to bend toward collective opinion, even when that opinion contradicts personal experience. This isn't mere weakness. It's an ancient survival mechanism that helped our ancestors stay safely within the tribe. The brain weighs social acceptance against personal conviction, and social acceptance frequently wins. Classic experiments. reveal just how powerful this force can be. People will deny what their eyes clearly show them, agreeing with obviously wrong answers, simply to avoid the discomfort of standing apart. The pull toward conformity operates below conscious awareness, shaping decisions before we even realize we're making them. In our interconnected world, this tendency becomes both more complex and more consequential. As digital groups amplify the pressure to align, the human brain treats compliments like tangible rewards, lighting up pleasure centers with the same intensity as monetary gains. When someone receives genuine praise, dopamine floods the striatum, creating a neurochemical celebration that can be measured and mapped. This isn't just psychological fluff, it's biology in action, the same reward system that helped our ancestors learn and survive. Even small acknowledgements can trigger this response, suggesting that recognition might be as fundamental a human need as food or shelter. The effect ripples outward, improving performance, boosting confidence, and strengthening social bonds. There's something beautiful about how a few sincere words can literally reshape brain chemistry, turning ordinary moments into sources of motivation and connection. The brain possesses a remarkable ability to simulate pain it has never actually experienced. Simply observing someone else's injury or reading a vivid description can activate the same neural networks involved in processing real physical suffering. This mental simulation likely evolved to enhance empathy and help us avoid dangerous situations by learning from others' misfortunes. The overlap between imagined and real pain processing is substantial enough to make us physically recoil from another person's injury. This capacity for vicarious suffering demonstrates how interconnected our experiences really are, how the boundaries between self and other blur at the neurological level. It also explains why anticipated pain can influence behavior so powerfully, creating anxiety and avoidance responses before any actual harm occurs. Sleep deprivation creates a cruel paradox. The more experiences we try to cram into our waking hours, the less we remember of them. During deep sleep phases, the hippocampus works tirelessly to consolidate the day's events, transferring fragile short-term memories into more permanent storage. Without adequate rest, this critical process fails, leaving experiences to fade like unfinished photographs. Even one night of poor sleep can weaken the brain's ability to form lasting memories. Chronic sleep loss compounds this problem, creating a cognitive decline that affects not just recall, but the very capacity to learn new information. The stories of our days, the accumulation of experiences that shape who we are, require sleep to transform from fleeting moments into permanent parts of our personal narrative. Repetition alone can make falsehoods feel true, a phenomenon that reveals how easily our sense of truth can be manipulated. The illusory truth effect shows that familiar statements gain credibility simply through repeated exposure, regardless of their actual accuracy. The brain begins to mistake familiarity for truth, a shortcut that usually serves us well, but can lead us astray in our information-rich world. When we hear something repeated over and over, our brains start treating it like truth, even when it isn't. This happens because our minds have learned to trust what feels familiar. Way back in our evolutionary past, things we encountered frequently were usually safe, reliable patterns worth remembering. So the brain developed this shortcut, where familiar equals trustworthy. But today, this ancient wiring can work against us. Information gets repeated endlessly through media, social networks, advertisements. The more we hear a claim, the more believable it becomes, regardless of whether it's actually accurate. It's like our brains are saying, well, I've heard this before, so it must be true. This mental trick helped our ancestors survive, but now it makes us vulnerable to misinformation campaigns and false advertising. The human face holds incredible power over our minds. Evolution has given us specialized brain regions that do nothing but process faces all day long. There's an area called the fusiform face area, tucked away in the temporal lobe, that works like a supercomputer dedicated entirely to facial recognition. This system can identify a person faster than we can remember their name. It reads emotions in micro-expressions, spots the tiniest changes in someone's mood. The brain treats faces as so important that it sees them everywhere, even where they don't exist. Those faces in clouds, in rock formations, in the pattern of electrical outlets. That's our face detection system working overtime. It's constantly scanning the world, looking for these crucial social signals. There's something fascinating about how anticipation can feel better than reality itself. Think about planning a vacation, waiting for a holiday, looking forward to seeing someone special. Often, that period of anticipation brings more joy than the actual event. Scientists call this the anticipation effect, and it makes perfect sense when you think about it. When we imagine future events, our minds craft perfect versions, free from all the messy complications that real life brings. In our imagination, everything goes smoothly. The weather is perfect, everyone's in a good mood, nothing goes wrong. This mental rehearsal doesn't just feel good, it actually changes our brain chemistry, releasing dopamine and other feel-good chemicals. Anticipation becomes its own source of happiness, stretching pleasure across weeks or months leading up to an event. Your brain forms impressions of faces in less than 1/10 of a second. That's faster than a blink, faster than conscious thought. The moment light from a face hits your retina, ancient circuits in your brain are already making judgments about trustworthiness, friendliness, competence. The amygdala, that small almond-shaped structure deep in the brain, is scanning for signs of threat or safety. These lightning-quick assessments feel like intuition because they happen below the level of conscious awareness. You meet someone and immediately feel like you trust them, or something seems off, and you don't know why. That's this rapid-fire facial analysis system at work. Of course, these snap judgments can be completely wrong, colored by unconscious biases and past experiences. The connection between smell and emotion runs deeper than most people realize. When you catch a whiff of something, those scent molecules travel directly to the limbic system, the brain's emotional center. They bypass all the rational thinking parts of your brain and go straight to the areas that control mood and memory. This means a smell can change how you feel before you're even consciously aware you're smelling anything. A trace of lavender might slow your heart rate and make you feel calmer. The scent of citrus could sharpen your focus and boost alertness. These effects happen automatically, operating in the background of consciousness. The air around us is constantly carrying these invisible chemical messages that our brains translate into emotions and memories. When you hear a soft piano melody late at night, your breathing naturally begins to slow down. Your heart rate drops a few beats per minute. This happens because sound doesn't just bounce around inside your ears. It travels deep into regions of your brain that control emotions, memories, and even physical movement. The ancient parts of our minds, the ones that kept our ancestors alive, still react to every whistle of wind, every creak of a floorboard, every distant hum of traffic. These old survival systems treated sound as information, dangerous or safe, friend or predator. Today, we carry this same wiring in our heads, responding to ringtones and car alarms with the same neural pathways that once analyzed the rustle of leaves for hidden threats. Some frequencies create that pleasant tingling sensation you might know from certain videos or gentle whispers. Others make you feel uneasy, tense, like nails on a chalkboard. Your body doesn't ask permission, it just responds. The rhythms around us, whether they come from music, conversation, or the steady drone of an air conditioner, all leave their mark on how we feel physically. It's as if every sound writes a small note on the surface of our nervous system. There's something different that happens in your mind when you're working through a problem completely alone. No other voices in the room, no one else's opinions floating around to influence your thoughts. The brain scans of people solving puzzles in solitude show increased activity in areas linked to introspection, to looking inward rather than outward. This kind of thinking tends to be slower, more reflective, like water moving through sand rather than rushing down a hill. Without the energy and quick exchanges that come from working with others, the mind settles into a different rhythm. It's more likely to stumble onto unusual solutions, connections that might not emerge in the rapid back and forth of group discussion. Of course, working alone requires a particular kind of mental discipline. There's no external momentum to keep you moving forward, no social pressure to stay engaged. But there's also no pressure to conform. No subtle influence pushing your ideas toward what others expect to hear. The mind, left to its own devices, sometimes wanders into territory it would never explore in company. Group work brings its own advantages. The spark of shared energy, the way one person's half-formed thought can trigger someone else's breakthrough. Yet, it also carries the risk of everyone slowly drifting toward the same conclusions, like rivers flowing into the same valley. Think about the most vivid memory you have. Chances are, it's tied to a moment of strong emotion, joy, fear, surprise, or sadness. These memories feel different from ordinary ones, more detailed, more alive, as if they were recorded with better equipment. When something emotionally significant happens, a small structure called the amygdala essentially sends an urgent message to the hippocampus, the brain's memory center. It's like marking a file as important, ensuring it gets stored with extra care. This is why you can remember exactly where you were during major life events, what the weather was like, what you were wearing, even decades later. But emotion, while it sharpens some details, can blur others. The central elements of an emotional memory, how you felt, who was there, the main events, these stay crystal clear. The peripheral details, what time it was, what song was playing in the background, these might fade or get mixed up with other memories. It's as if emotion creates a spotlight that illuminates the most important parts of an experience while leaving the edges in shadow. These emotionally charged memories become part of the foundation of who we are, moments where our hearts and minds work together to ensure we would never forget. If you watch people talking, really talking, you'll notice something interesting. They start to mirror each other's movements without realizing it. One person leans forward, the other does too. Someone gestures with their hands, their conversation partner begins using similar gestures. This unconscious imitation isn't accidental. It's one of the ways we signal attention and create connection. When someone mirrors your posture or expressions, even slightly, you're more likely to find them persuasive, more likely to feel understood. It happens in negotiations, in sales conversations, in casual chats between friends. The effect is strongest when it's natural, when it emerges from genuine attention, rather than calculated manipulation. This kind of mirroring is really a form of empathy, made visible, a conversation between bodies that supports the conversation between minds. It suggests that understanding someone isn't just about processing their words, it's about synchronizing with their physical presence, creating a shared rhythm that makes communication feel easier, more natural. Perhaps most remarkably, your brain never stops changing. The neural pathways that carry your thoughts, your habits, your memories, they're constantly being rebuilt based on what you do, what you experience, what you practice. Scientists call this neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself throughout your entire life. New connections form between brain cells, old ones strengthen or weaken, depending on how often you use them. Every time you learn someone's name, every time you practice a skill, every time you have a new experience, you're literally reshaping the physical structure of your mind. This flexibility is greatest when we're children, when the brain is still developing, but it continues well into old age, allowing people to recover from strokes, master new abilities, and change long-held patterns of behavior. When we dedicate ourselves to learning a skill, something remarkable happens beneath the surface. The very structure of our brain begins to change, reshaping itself in response to our practice. Musicians develop in enlarged areas devoted to finger movement and hearing. Artists show enhanced visual processing regions. Even taxi drivers who navigate complex city streets for years display expanded areas responsible for spatial memory. We are, in the most literal sense, architects of our own neural landscapes, constantly building and rebuilding the pathways that define who we are. The brain's capacity for change doesn't stop there, though. It extends into how we experience the very fabric of reality itself. Time, that seemingly constant flow we take for granted, becomes surprisingly flexible under the influence of intense emotion. When fear grips us, when excitement surges through our veins, when awe washes over us, time itself seems to bend and stretch like warm glass. This isn't just imagination playing tricks on us. During moments of high stress or intense focus, our brains actually kick into overdrive, processing vastly more sensory information than usual. Every detail becomes magnified, every sensation amplified. The result is that a few seconds of real time can feel like minutes in our subjective experience. A car accident, a first kiss, standing at the edge of a cliff. These moments expand in our memory, rich with detail our heightened awareness managed to capture. On the flip side, when we're deeply absorbed in something we love, time seems to evaporate entirely. Hours can pass like minutes when we're lost in creative work, deep conversation, or pure enjoyment. This isn't a bug in our mental software, it's a feature. Our brains are designed to pay special attention to significant moments, whether threatening or wonderful, ensuring they're encoded with extra clarity for future reference. This flexibility in how we experience time reveals something profound about the nature of consciousness itself. We don't just passively receive reality, we actively construct our experience of it, moment by moment. The brain serves as both camera and editor, deciding what deserves our attention and how intensely we should feel each passing second. Yet for all we've learned about these neural mechanisms, the deeper mysteries of consciousness remain largely untouched. How does the firing of neurons give rise to the rich, subjective experience of being you? Why do we have inner lives at all, complete with private thoughts, vivid dreams, and that constant sense of being someone looking out at the world? Consciousness might be the most familiar thing we know, since we live inside it every waking moment, and yet it's also the most puzzling. We can map every neuron, track every electrical impulse, but somehow the leap from brain activity to subjective experience remains as mysterious as ever. It's like trying to understand how a symphony emerges from the individual notes, except in this case, we're both the orchestra and the audience. Memory adds another layer to this puzzle. We think of our memories as recordings, faithful captures of past events, but research shows they're more like stories we tell ourselves, changing slightly each time we recall them. Every time you remember your childhood birthday party or your first day at school, you're not just accessing a file, you're reconstructing the experience from scattered neural fragments. The act of remembering actually changes the memory itself, making it a living, evolving part of who you are. Dreams push these boundaries even further. Every night, our sleeping brains create entire worlds, complete with characters, conversations, and impossible physics. We accept these nocturnal narratives as real while we're experiencing them, only questioning their logic after we wake. During dream sleep, the brain seems to be sorting through the day's experiences, filing away important information and discarding the rest. But it's also doing something more creative, combining memories in novel ways, solving problems, and sometimes producing genuine insights. The emotional centers of our brains never truly rest either. Even in sleep, our minds continue processing feelings, working through conflicts, and integrating experiences. This is why we sometimes wake up with clarity about problems that seemed insurmountable the night before. Sleep isn't just physical restoration, it's emotional and intellectual maintenance. Each discovery about how our minds work seems to reveal new questions rather than final answers. The more we learn about memory, consciousness, perception, and emotion, the more intricate and interconnected these systems appear. We're not dealing with separate modules working in isolation, but with an integrated network where everything influences everything else. Perhaps this complexity shouldn't surprise us. After all, the human brain contains roughly 86 billion neurons, each connected to thousands of others through trillions of synapses. The number of possible connections exceeds the number of stars in the observable universe. We're carrying around, in the space of about 3 pounds, the most complex structure known to exist anywhere. This biological marvel sitting between our ears processes not just thoughts and memories, but also generates our sense of self, our ability to imagine futures that don't yet exist, our capacity for empathy and love. It creates art, music, poetry, and science, while simultaneously managing the thousands of unconscious processes that keep us alive moment by moment. The brain accomplishes all this while consuming about as much energy as a 20-watt light bulb. It's more efficient than any computer ever built, more creative than any artificial intelligence system, and more adaptable than any machine we can imagine. Yet most of the time we barely notice this incredible organ at work, taking for granted the seamless experience of being conscious, thinking, feeling humans. In quiet moments of reflection, when we turn our attention inward, we can sometimes catch glimpses of our own mental processes in action. We notice thoughts arising seemingly from nowhere, emotions shifting like weather patterns, memories surfacing unbidden from the depths of our personal history. These moments of self-awareness remind us that we're not separate from our minds. We are our minds, experiencing themselves from the inside.
you.